Hello and welcome to our first ever panel discussion at Bedrock. It's going to be the first in a series of panel discussions about best practice. And why not start it off with best practice when it comes to whole school literacy improvement? Now, we've got three teachers here who I've spoken to, over this year in points and thought it would be really great to hear your views on this and to hear how you approach whole school literacy within your context. So I'm going to invite Craig to introduce himself first.
Thanks, Alex. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Craig. I am a head teacher at a one-form entry primary school in Spalding, Lincolnshire. We are part of a 8-school multi-academy trust, so there's 7 primaries, and currently we have 1 secondary school. Among my other hats, as well as leading whole school improvement, I also have a very keen interest in science, so I lead science across the multi-academy trust as well. Delighted to be here. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. And Tara, do you want to introduce yourself? Oh, actually, is she still there? We'll go Ellie. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I am Ellie Ashton. I am the head of English at John Smeaton Academy in Leeds, which is part of the Untitled Learning Multi-Academy Trust. And I work with various other people across the school to improve literacy alongside doing my head of English job.
Wow. So, and then Tara, you're back with us. Would you like to introduce yourself? Tara, are you able to unmute? Oh, there you go.
Hi, I can't actually hear anything, so I'm hoping you guys can hear me. My name's Tara Hobson and I am RWCM lead at Hailsham Community College. I oversee Bedrock. I come up with ideas along with the rest of my team to help compose a whole school literacy plan for our school. And also have a big part in overseeing the reading tests that we do for Key Stage 3 and 4 twice a year.
Wow. So I feel like that's the tip of the iceberg for all of you, because as we all know, you don't just do your roles. I'm sure there's lots and lots of other things. And actually, Tara is well known as being the TikTok teacher. You're very creative over lockdown. I did say this is our first ever panel. So yeah, maybe technical things, but we're gonna see how we get on. So in terms of context, and we'll keep it the same order. So Craig, are you able to just describe your context so that people watching the webinar have an idea of what your challenges and context is?
Yeah, absolutely. So the school is relatively new, so we're only we're into our 7th year. So our current year 6 children were the first children in reception. So we have just over 240 children. We've taken in 2 bulge years. So the year 6 is a bulge year, so we took in over pan of 30. And our current year 2s, we also took in over pan of 30. So one of the biggest challenges we faced in the early stages is we have high mobility, particularly higher up the school, where we've had a lot of children who have joined beyond reception. So we have a lot of children who actually join in Key Stage 2. So not only are we attempting to catch up on the missed learning and everything like that, the other thing we should say is we are 50% EAL. So a lot of the children who join us are new to school, new to country EAL children. So very little English. So the big challenges that we face are not only settling them into a new school, new country, but actually getting them up to speed with being able to access curriculum areas very, very quickly. The other side of that as well is the parents also have very little English. So our ability to engage the parents as well as the children is a real battle when we're facing with the language. The languages that we deal with as well are quite wide. So we probably have around 12 different languages. So Lithuanian, Polish, Russian, Bulgarian, Romanian, Latvian, you know, the list goes on. So, which is why obviously for us, the idea of vocab and oracy being key for us to sort of unlock the children's learning is basically at the heart of everything we do.
Yeah, wow, that is there's quite a few different nationalities in a single entry or form entry primary school, and it's quite interesting because the director of Bedrock, she was actually a head of English at an international school in Vietnam. So when she was designing Bedrock, EAL learners were very much at the forefront, and I guess when we go into talking about what's the best strategies for those kind of learners, I'm sure that will come up. But yeah, thank you for that. And also I was just thinking, so you have lots of new starters throughout the year. Is that to do with are there military bases nearby, just out of interest?
No, actually, so basically we're Lincolnshire. For anyone who doesn't know, it's quite a rural area, so it's a lot of farm work, factory work. So with our current year 6, for example, we've got 40 children in there, so we've got 20 spaces basically to fill. So what happens is we tend to get people who move into the area looking for work join us. And we have it the other way as well. So we've had quite a lot. The number there has fluctuated from as high as 50 down to 40. So we have children who move in, they're doing their work, then they leave, and then we have somebody else come in. So it's a bit of a toing and froing, but so it's not necessarily military, but more seasonal work which people are doing. Yeah.
Okay. And so actually diagnostic tools are going to be quite crucial to see where they're at when they first join. Okay, Ellie, I'm going to make you large here, so here you go. Sort of what's your context? It's very different to Craig's, I believe.
Yeah, very different. It's quite interesting actually hearing about a primary school. So I am at a secondary school in Leeds, in East Leeds, and we actually have on entry about 50% of our students' reading age is below their actual age. So our current year 7 cohort, when they started, we actually had 56 out of the 56 out of the 104 of them had a reading age below 10. So we have had to do quite a lot to support those students with their literacy, and we have to continue doing that throughout the whole school. And we also have quite a high above national average pupil premium percentage. So again, we have to do lots more to sort of engage them with their literacy and their sort of parents to catch them up and close those gaps between our pupil premium and our non-pupil premium students.
Wow, so a lot. And in terms of your role as well, you're responsible, I believe, for Key Stage 3 and 4.
Yeah, so I'm responsible for the for English and managing the curriculum of English, and I also oversee the Bedrock and a lot of our whole school literacy strategies across the school, which is actually quite useful because I get to see all the sort of overarching strategies and how it impacts the curriculum and looking at it from that perspective. So that's really, really interesting.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so we've got a high percentage of pupil premium and a lot of them coming with that reading age. And do you mind me asking sort of how you measured the reading age?
So we use the NGRT tests. We test students 3 times a year. So we baseline them every year to ascertain what their reading age is. And that was especially useful after lockdown because we've been able to look at if any children had regressed in their reading age and sort of analyse those gaps. We then do a mid-year assessment where we are then able to put in interventions in place if they need it. And then at the end of the year, we look at the impact. And then we do that every single year just to make sure that we're constantly monitoring and picking up any sort of ghost children as well that may have slipped through the net at the first test. We pick them up again at the second one.
Yeah, and then in terms of the impact of lockdown, did you see any learning loss or want of a better term?
It was really interesting actually because we continued to use Bedrock, and that was the sort of a lot of what students did for their English work at home, and a lot of students did maintain that. So they were doing the reading, and we were doing things like reading to them on YouTube and things like that to sort of keep them going. and we were expecting more regression than we got. There was less progress, but there wasn't much regression, if that makes sense.
Oh, that's good news. Yeah. Oh, well, and that's, you know, they were using Bedrock at home, so that's good news. I am just seeing if Tara is available to, in terms of Tara's context, I think it's quite similar to yours, Ellie. There is a high pupil premium percentage of students, and she's based in Hailsham, but she actually came on board with a group of schools in terms of Beacon Academies down the road, and they do teacher training type things. So yeah, it'd be interesting once if she's able to join us again to see, you know, her point of view on all of that. So here we are. Yes, Tara. We were just talking about your context. You're going to be able to give me a much better answer than I just
Hiya,
gave.
sorry, I have no sound at all, so I can't hear what you're saying at all, Alex. But yeah, but I heard that bit because I was in the main room. So yeah, I'm kind of the same. We have a high pupil premium at the school, and I came in late. Started off. We only had a couple of months that I was in the school before we went into lockdown. So I kind of took this role on, and it was a bit difficult, obviously, because I wasn't actually talking to people. But we went and we have done reading tests with all of our Key Stage 3 and 4 to ascertain their reading age. We have implemented Bedrock, and it's compulsory. The students are taking part in doing this twice a week. And we have just started retesting at the moment. So we test twice a year. So we've had a really good response with our year 8s at the moment. And out of the 191 so far that we've tested, they've gone up an average of 1 year and 6 months. So that's really, really positive on them and on Bedrock, because obviously what we're using it. But yeah, like Ellie, during lockdown, we were doing extracurricular stuff like reading to them. We did the masked reader, which was really good fun. We did lots of competitions, and mainly with the Key Stage 3 on the competitions. We were having like 300 plus entries, and people saying what books they're reading and talking about it, using TikTok to motivate them. So it was really good, and a really good way of getting the students on board.
Fab. And I particularly like your extreme reading. I saw some, you know, photos of students reading in funny positions on Twitter as well, which it looked like a really good way of engaging them. All right then, so we're moving on now. So given your context and the challenges that you face, Craig, what are your focuses or foci? You can talk about this year or next year, because, you know, given lockdown and everything, we might just want to focus on the future, but it's up to you.
Yeah, no problem. So obviously we had great plans in place this year. COVID sort of curtailed those, but literacy was one of our main focuses, reading and writing. But I think as the two literacy leads on stage with me here, and anybody who's a literacy lead in the room will know that when we talk about literacy, and my subject leader will often tell me about this, is that literacy is huge as a subject. So we've decided to focus mainly on this year on the reading. So even when we look at the context of reading, it in itself is again massive in terms of all of the things which we need to be sort of focusing in on. So we broke it down. When we looked at reading, we thought about guided reading, the approaches to that. We looked at the reading for pleasure as an area. We then looked at what I would call the reading scheme. So that's the Biff, Chip and Kipper books, you know, your Oxford Reading Tree.
They're still going?
Yes, they are still going in a certain,
good news.
Yeah, in a certain way, shape or form. We looked at reading assessments, and we also looked at the classroom learning environments, obviously our phonic approach, and then we broke it down into sort of the vocabulary and the oracy. So with our school context being 50% EAL, the reason we focused on this is, again, you know, I'm going to quote this, it's only because I read it on a piece of research, but improving your reading, it's been basically proven to increase the skills of comprehension, vocabulary, spelling, speaking, listening, writing, your overall general knowledge. And again, the other aspect for us is it also increases the sort of the general aspirations, because what we find as well with our cohort of children is whilst our pupil premium numbers are low, we come from what we would class as a sort of a low skilled, low aspirational area. So lots of our families working massively important industries, but a lot of them are farm-based land work, working in factories. So we often find that the parents are working pretty much 12-hour shifts, rotating. So one's at home picking up, one's at work, and then basically they swap over. They're working night shifts and everything like that, which is where our battle of parental engagement and things like that come from. So that's quite a wide scoping bit that we focused in on, but those were the elements which we felt as part of our curriculum intent. For us, vocabulary and oracy is key to everything. It unlocks the ability of our EAL children to communicate with us, with their peers. That builds self-esteem, it builds confidence. That impacts then in their ability to engage in the wider curriculum as well, and it impacts in their written skills and obviously the spelling, which is obviously ticking all of these aspects which the research said it would. Do you want to talk about anything in particular we've looked at?
I mean, I think we've got lots to work from there. I was just about to say, it did remind me of when we spoke last, you said, reading is the gateway to everything, and reading and vocabulary go hand in hand. And you touched on, cultural capital being, developed from that. And then also, oh, there you are.
There, sorry.
No, it's okay. Cultural capital. And then obviously that last bit that you, trying to remember what you just said there, the cultural capital being crucial. And the aspirations, building those aspirations, because and I was thinking that it sounded like you drew from the Education Endowment Foundation quite a lot. I don't know whether you did or it was something else, because it sounded like you went through every single step that they recommended.
Well, it was certainly something that I read, but I think for us it was almost the afterthought. I read that.
It reassured you in the right direction.
We'd already identified as a school in terms of the children that we're sort of educating and dealing with. We want them to understand that the sky's the limit for them. So whatever they want to achieve, they can. Whether it's working at NASA, whether it's working in the factory, anything like that. As long as they're happy and that's what they want and that's their dream, that's for us to unlock. And for us, the whole idea of like I said, vocabulary, reading is at the key of that. It's the heart of our curriculum in everything we do.
And actually, the social and emotional aspects of learning, lockdown just went to show that is crucial. Like sort of, they go hand in hand for all of that. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, for us, and again, I don't know what it was like for other schools, but when we locked down the second time, we had 50% of our school was actually in because the key worker lists are vulnerable children. So we juggled, and the toughest thing that we found was basically juggling, because we're one form, face-to-face teaching with remote learning was the biggest challenge we had. And again, I know Ellie and Tara both touched on using Bedrock as a way of keeping that going. We did too. It was a valuable tool for someone, monitor what the children were doing, but also as a way of keeping the children engaged with what we wanted for them to be doing in school.
Yeah, and actually, you've all touched on audio, so having videos of you reading, or and actually with Bedrock, they've got the audio, and then you're honing on the vocabulary as well. So I can understand how it works with what your plans were. Okay, so Ellie, what are your main foci? We'll go into your strategies, Craig, next. Don't worry, we're going to that. Okay, so Ellie, what sort of aspects of literacy are you focusing on?
So we've got quite a few sort of focuses that we've got going on. Our first one, again, similar to Craig, is the love of reading. We've got an amazing librarian who is absolutely fantastic, and she just runs with so many brilliant ideas. And we're really so lucky to have her, because sort of as we've started to get students really into reading, everything else is starting to really fall into place, and we've really seen that since she started working at Smeaton. And we're also really working as a whole school on sort of vocabulary improvement, and then how that translates then into the classroom. So how what they're doing on Bedrock then informs their sort of written communication and their oracy in the classroom. And we've got lots of sort of whole school strategies that we're implementing consistently across the school in order to really accelerate their literacy progression.
So in terms of so you said about the writing, how are you? Well, actually, I was going to jump and talk about the impact. I was like, how are you measuring that? But we'll talk about that later. But I have to say, a good librarian is worth their weight in gold.
Absolutely.
And I guess getting the students to take ownership of that pleasure in reading. Have you managed to do that, or is there a lot of steering? Do you have library lessons?
Yeah, so we used to use the accelerated reader scheme, and it used to fall in very sort of hand in hand with our they used to get a lot of comments and things like that if they didn't pass their tests and if they didn't do quizzes. So we had this real culture of, oh, I don't like reading, I hate literacy lessons, I don't like the library, and it was really, really sad. So we took accelerated reader away, just because the students it was really hampering their confidence, because we have so many students who are in year 10, for example, with a reading age of an 11-year-old, and or maybe even lower than that, and they're being asked to read a book, told they can only read the books in a certain section of the library, and actually that wasn't what they were interested in, and it wasn't going to make them read. So we stripped all that back and just went for even just getting them to enjoy the library again and picking books. And we have about 94% of our students have a book from the library that they read, and we have literacy lessons at Key Stage 3 where they do half Bedrock and then half reading. And we have these fantastic reading journals that we made as a team that have 100 books to read before you leave JSA. And so they get stamps every time they read one of the books, and they write reviews. And we're sort of developing that to also include their Bedrock vocabulary, which I always tweet pictures of. So they put their Bedrock vocabulary in there as well to sort of keep record of what they're learning. So we're sort of hand in hand putting their vocabulary alongside their reading.
The reading, yeah.
Of it.
I would love to see that list of 100 books.
Oh, it was actually
and see if I read it.
Choosing which books to put in the 100.
Yeah, I bet.
There's too many good ones to choose from.
Yes, and there's some brilliant young adult or young person fiction at the moment. Yeah. So I think Tara should be joining us. Thank you. If not, we can move on to, well, we kind of did move on to strategies there with Ellie. Let's see. We'll go on to strategies with Craig, and if Tara pops up, then we can always here we go. Hi, Tara.
Hiya, sorry, I'm having huge sound problems. Nothing's working at all. Strategies we've put in place. We're focusing, on reading ages as well, and expanding the students' vocabulary, because obviously the academic language that is in assessments, so BTEC assessments, and obviously GCSEs, you need a reading age of like 15 and above to be able to access these. So we are really honing in on making sure that our lesson plans are aimed at the reading ages of our class. So we have something called class charts, and it shows the data of our students so that the teachers can do seating plans and things like that on it. So each of the students there, it's really clear to see for the teacher the reading age of the student. So we're really focusing on making sure that when we introduce new vocabulary into our lessons, that we are using the tier 3 and tier 2 words, so like they're using on Bedrock, but the way that we are teaching the vocabulary, so the way we're explaining the definitions, the examples that we give for those definitions, and the way in which we encourage the students to remember it. So can they act out that new word? Can they see it? Is there a noise that goes with it, to really embed it and really make sure they remember what those new words are? So reading ages and vocabulary is something that we are really pushing, because we, like Ellie mentioned, have some really low reading ages here. But we have also managed to sort out funding for 2 book vending machines. So like Ellie said, I have a fantastic team as well, and our librarian Lucy is just incredible, and she's sourcing books for us, and we are going to get this book vending machine, and then when they complete their sessions on Bedrock, the students can earn tokens for the book vending machine, so they can go and get themselves a new book for it. So we're really excited about doing that as well.
Okay, fantastic. That sounds really great. So it's reading and the love of reading, which actually a lot of us need to revisit after lockdown, and instilling that excitement and passion for it. So Craig, the others sort of skipped ahead and touched on their strategies, but I'll let you talk about, what things have you put in place to support your students?
Okay, so because of reading such a big thing, so when we're introducing it to staff, any sort of new strategy, staff can get a bit, something new, and they sort of think of how much work it's going to involve at the end rather than the steps. So we always look for the quick wins first. So we introduce very easy things for the staff which could have big impact. So we introduced the daily 15 minutes, nothing groundbreaking, the daily 15 minutes of being read to by the class teacher, which is important to show, how to different intonation, the love of books, etc. We also then introduced the daily silent read for children as well, so that they had time to read and enjoy a book, which again, lots of our children don't have that opportunity at home, either because parents are really busy, or there's other things, other distractions going on. We introduced what we would call class texts on our doors. So outside each of our classrooms, we have like a mini display which basically displays the class book of what the current class are looking at. So anybody who's walking around our school can see what texts the children are engaging with. And then I often stop children, well, not stop them, but when they're walking up and down, I go, oh, what's your class text? What are you enjoying about it? What are you not? And etc. And then we did loads of things with parents, just promoted reading, so reading fairs, reading competitions, etc. So we implemented them quite quickly. Those were things we did in a staff meeting, staff got on board, and which are now fully embedded. In terms of the longer term strategies that we looked at, so we reviewed and revised our whole approach to guided reading. So I won't bore everybody with the details of exactly what we did, but we used to do a carousel of guided reading. So where we would have a group working with the teacher, a group maybe working on comprehension, and then there would be 3 groups, for example, who would be doing literacy-based tasks, spelling, handwriting, which had a place and is successful. But when we looked at it, we thought, this is a dedicated reading. There's 3 groups who aren't getting dedicated reading. So we moved to a whole class guided reading approach, which is fully embedded in Key Stage 2, but in Key Stage 1, where, again, because it's a little bit trickier in Key Stage 1, it takes a lot of skill to sort of hold those. We introduced the use of Vipers, which again, I'm sure lots of people know what they mean, but we wanted a consistent approach to the language of every child and every class across the school. So we introduced that, and we then tailored our whole school approach to really begin to break down the idea of when we're doing guided reading. So we really looked at what the skills the children need in order to access the text. So again, with the vocabulary, the inference, the predicting, which is what these stand for, there's loads of questions that go with them. So we will basically sort of, tongue-in-cheek really, or a little bit of both. We don't like to ever think about SAT, but as a primary school, it does hang over us at the end of year 6. So it was one way of equipping children when they were being asked questions of, well, okay, how do I approach this? What are the things I need to be looking for? But actually, the main thing is the use of these enabled us to have better in-depth discussions with the teacher on our class text, because we could focus the questions. Children could actually think more about what are the answers I need to give for this question. So when I talk about the scheme books, so obviously we look at reading in two ways. We look at scheme books, which is what Ellie and Tara have been talking about quite a lot, which are books linked to the reading ability of the child. So books in which they're going to be able to understand and read 90% of the words fluently, means they can understand simple plots, they can talk about it. So we revamped that because it was very complex. We had a mixture of schemes, which does work because it widened what the books the children were looking at. And you know, we've got to be very careful about giving a child who could be new to the country or just sort of a low ability reader in year 4, you know, the magic key, Oxford Reading Tree Stage 6. And we have books which mask that but are still at their reading age. Yeah. So we needed to simplify so that teachers were very clear on what book to give what child and why. So so then we looked at the bottom end, phonics. So again, anybody who's in the room at primary will understand that Ofsted have a huge bugbear in being their bonnet about phonics and it being the key to early reading, which, you know, that's probably a different place. But really making sure that the books that the children got match the phonic ability. So we weren't giving them books that had words that involved phase 5 when there was only on phase 3. So we sorted all of that out. The caveat to that was then we sort of then looked at and was, we've got to be very careful with the scheme books, because if we're only giving books to children where they're able to read them, how are they learning new words? So that's obviously when we introduced the idea of Bedrock, the idea of reading for pleasure. So the scheme books is reading for a purpose, building you up, building your skills, your confidence. Reading for pleasure is the other side of it, the love of reading. And that's ultimately our main aim, is to actually get children off scheme books to want to read. Once we get that, we've made it. So we introduced Bedrock, and we've been doing Bedrock for about 18 months, but COVID has scuppered us quite a lot, because we initially wanted to make sure it was done properly. So we do 3 sessions of Bedrock a week for about half an hour on our devices. It's been quite tight on the timetable, but we wanted to make sure that the staff, the children, understood it before we sort of relinquished that to parents and us not being in complete control. So that has been, I think there's another question coming up, so I won't talk too much about that, but very successful. And again, the idea of Bedrock was we wanted the children to understand again the purpose behind it. I know when we spoke before, Alex, my big mantra is I never ask the staff, who in turn never ask the children, really to do anything unless there's a purpose, unless it has impact. So the whole idea with this was basically we weren't just seeing it as we had to win the staff over, so it took time for us to get them to see why we're doing it, what's in it for you as a staff, how you can make it work in your classrooms. Because in primary school, it might be different in secondary school, but we can sell anything to children. I mean, you know, we can make everything the best thing ever. So, you know, when I was in the classroom, somebody would come in and they would go, "Oh, what's your favourite subject?" It'd be handwriting, only because I'd gone, "Oh, I love handwriting. I do it all the time at home." Well, you know, and so we needed to do that with the Bedrock and get them to understand it. And, you know, it's really having an impact. And I think it was Ellie who mentioned about that we get children to, when they're reading their own reading for pleasure books, they add post-it notes in when they come across new words, they write the definitions. So by the end of it, these books are full of post-it notes of all the new words they've learned. Their Bedrock works in there. We have displays in the classroom where we've got these tier 2 words, the tier 3 words. Children write definitions. So when I'm wandering around the school, I'll go into these classrooms, much obviously to the horror of teachers, and say, "Oh, there's a word here. Who could tell me what that word means?" And obviously, that's what we do. It's all drip feeding and really moving that along. So, and finally, because I know I've talked a lot here, so apologies. The other thing we introduced heavily was the ebooks. So we do a lot of to try and get the parental engagement. So we use ReadingX, which again is another way of being able to assign books to children, because Sometimes I had an interesting discussion with my CEO in terms of where we're heading. Are we moving away from physical books? Children are now on Kindles, iPads. So we're trying to do both. There's pros and cons to them, but we've used Reading Eggs and the Big Cat Collins as well, which is a big impact for us. Sorry, I've talked I apologize.
No, I liked how you like for the short wins, the quick wins, it's carving out that time so the teachers have time to do that sharing the reading, and they have time to do that independent reading, and the visual, book covers on the door. It's always really powerful. Displays are really powerful, and going beyond that, there's a lot going on, but we'll move on to Ellie, and I'm sure she'll build on all the things that you said. But I do find it interesting with the, being able to see where the students are at, but actually they want to read stuff that's interesting to them. Plus, you want to be stretching and challenging where possible. But we know they need to understand 90% at least of the text to comprehend it. So it's always a balancing act. And with Bedrock, the alpha test does really help that, and the automatic block reassignment. So, glad to hear that's working for you. But Ellie, what strategies beyond what you've already told us have you been putting into place?
Cool. So what I'll do is I'll just start off by talking about like the reading stuff that we have done sort of whole school, and then also just more sort of in classroom literacy stuff that we've done as well, just to sort of organise my thoughts a little bit. Reading activities that we are sort of really big on, we use Book Buzz. I don't know if people have heard of it. It's a really fantastic scheme that the Book Trust do, where for year 7 and 8 pupils at the beginning of the year, you pay £3 per child and you get a choice of 18 books, and then every child gets a free book, and that's been something that our students really, really love, and they always do really amazing videos about the books where the author talks about them, and that's something that from the beginning of year 7 we sometimes wrap them up and we give them little gifts with them, and it's just a really sort of lovely thing for the students to sort of have their own book that's theirs that they then get to keep and read again, and they sort of really love that. And we also so I think it was Craig that mentioned it about linking sort of words to their meaning. We have, during lockdown, we started using Adobe Spark, which is this brilliant platform that's really, really easy for students to turn words and images into videos. So that's something that we've done alongside student reading. To sort of improve their sort of vocabulary. So they use that to then, they turn their poems into videos. They also do book reviews on Spark. And that's been really, really fantastic because it uses all the dual coding of matching an image to its definition. And that is something that they actually quite enjoy out of the sort of library and outside of school for some of our more sort of techie children. We also heavily sort of get involved in lots of the different sort of national programs like World Book Day and Roald Dahl Day. We sort of really get big on those things just to really improve the sort of status of reading whole school. And we do really simple things like every time a child reads a book, we write the book that they've read on a piece of coloured card, and every class has a book stack on their door outside the classroom, and we've got year 7 classes that have got 87 books stacked up that they've read over the whole year, and that's something really visual around the corridor because they're not moving classrooms because of COVID, so it's one of the bonuses, and they have these really visual, this class has read 87 books, this class has read 40, and that's been really fantastic and really sort of empowering for the children that they have achieved all of that reading, so that's been really brilliant. And literacy activities, there's so sort of much that we've sort of done. I sort of agree with Craig about sort of the little wins to really get buy-in. I've done quite a lot of whole school CPD on literacy, and one of the sort of that had the most impact on the teachers was I made this infographic I made blob people, and then I highlighted the blob people to represent and the amount of students that were below their reading age and the amount of students that were below their writing age as well. And that was really hard hitting for some of the staff across the whole school. So science teachers, history teachers, everybody saw that and everyone was like, oh, I thought that was about behaviour points. And it was actually about student reading age. And that was something that then made people really switch on to think about I need to do something for these children. So that really helps, and I often just pop it up there in staff briefing, just like, look, this is still a problem, and what a challenge, not a problem.
Yeah.
So that's something, and we do really simple things like we use the do nows in lesson time to address literacy misconceptions. So using the TLAC technique that it's already embedded across the whole school to address literacy misconceptions, and then that enables teachers to make it subject specific rather than just being what's a noun, what's a verb, but what verbs do I need in history and how do I use them in this particular sentence. So that's been something that's been quite powerful, and is something that we really are continuing to work on. And it also links into knowledge retrieval and things like that, where students are correcting punctuation or adding in punctuation. So yeah, completely agree, doing small wins that teachers can sort of buy into. And another thing that we're sort of really doing, which I'm flitting back to reading strategies, we've just implemented Dear Time across the whole school. So that is where every tutor has a book, and every child in that tutor has the same book, and we have 20 minutes at the end of every day where every student in the whole school reads the book along with their tutor, which has been quite interesting actually, sort of giving the training to other teachers across the school and seeing science teachers and IT teachers and everybody standing there reading aloud. That's been something that teachers have found quite challenging themselves, and that's then enabled, I think, teachers to realise how important reading is for both themselves and for the students.
And
so
it is, sorry.
Things like that has really helped.
That's amazing. I was just thinking when Craig was saying it about guided reading and creating that reading community, actually, you know, secondary school students and adults also really benefit from that guided reading. So it's great to hear that they're doing that guided reading all together, you know, as tutors across the school. And that bringing in disciplinary literacy is, you know, obviously huge right now, and as it should be. And touching on grammar as well, bringing that in. I mean, there's so many different facets of literacy. But I should say, you both mentioned Tier 3. We did Bedrock Mapper is coming out in September, where you can put some Tier 3 words on, and also a Bedrock Grammar, basic and advanced for primary and for secondary. So that should also bolster what you're doing, all this amazing stuff that you're doing across the school. I like the idea also of all classes working together to get that stack of books. It's sort of a team effort. Tara, what strategies have you put in place? And we'll go on to impact, and I think we'll have to run that. Don't worry, we're not going to go on forever, just to our listeners. But it's so interesting. So Tara, yeah, strategies.
Right, I've got you back now, and I know. So sorry if I'm repeating myself, and I couldn't hear anything before, and I guessed what you were talking about, and now I can see.
You did very well.
Winged it. So yeah, strategies. So we have it's been difficult. Obviously, like I said, I came in early, and I know Ellie and Craig, you're obviously very established, and I came in, and Bedrock, when I came in, had just been piloted the year before. So one of our main strategy this year, since I've had the role I've got, was to implement Bedrock compulsory for all of Key Stage 3. So taking control of that and giving them motivation to complete it, giving them opportunities. We call our homework clubs champion hours, really encouraging the children to go and do that. So it is a compulsory thing. They have to do it. They get achievement points if they complete it, and they do get behaviour points if they don't complete it. And also 3 behaviour points, so that's 3 times of not completing Bedrock, results in a compulsory champions hour detention where they have to catch up. Because of COVID and time being taken away from the curriculum, we have to do it as home learning. We've just introduced 3 leverages in our school, so the things that we're doing, and 2 of them actually are very much literacy based. So we are doing starters, and they're very much encouraged to either be silent reading. And because of COVID, we're going to the students. So often we're walking in and they're already there. So they are to be silently reading, ready for when we're setting up the class and the lesson to get it ready. Or there are key words on the board and they're thinking already about what do these words mean? Do they know them? What could they mean? Break the words down, ready for questioning and just discussions on these new words. And a second leverage that we've brought in is, like I mentioned before, that all lessons need to be planned around reading ages so that we can include everybody, includes the SEND students, and it just makes it accessible to all the students that we're working with. We've also, we're piloting at the moment, actually. It's funny you mentioned, Ellie, that you are doing reading with all of your times in tutor times. We're just piloting Key Stage 3 at the moment, mentors reading to their mentor groups for 20 minutes once a week. And it's actually amazing. I've had such good feedback from it, who's doing it. My mentor group who are doing it as well, you could hear a pin drop. They're so relaxed. It's the beginning of the day, 20 minutes, to really try and encourage like this escape of books. COVID has had such a big impact on the mental health of our students. So to put strategies in place to encourage these children to read for pleasure, just as an outlet and for their mental health, is so important. And by reading to them, they can access the new vocabulary they might not be able to read on the pages themselves. We discuss any new words on there as well, and what might they mean, and different contexts these words can be used. So really trying to put in place things to embedding in our teachers and in the students. I'm also working on, with one of my amazing colleagues, Kerry, a strategy booklet on how to help other teachers teach the vocabulary to these students' reading ages, because this has just come in, we've just brought this in, and what I want to try and focus on is taking down any barriers that staff and teachers are going to find when we say, can you teach to these reading ages? I want to equip them with everything that they need to be able to do that. So we're currently working on ways of doing that, taking the words from the Bedrock knowledge organisers, so that this block, the students are reading, this block, this is how we can stretch it, this is how they're doing it in Bedrock, how can we implement it a whole school? But that's a work in progress at the moment.
And that comes with a lot of CPD attached to it as well. But I always almost say that, talking to a modern foreign language teacher is the best for this, because it's actually teaching in that way where, you hear it, you see it, you say it, and you're really experiencing the word. But interesting how you're talking about starters. I think Ellie's do now is the same as the starter, I'm guessing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, so impacts, and then we'll have to round up because we've had so much to share. But impacts, Craig, what have you seen any impacts anecdotally or data that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, very quickly, over the lockdown period, obviously there was all this talk of lost learning, etc. What we found was for the children who were at home, their reading fluency, they came back, either at the same sort of fluency level as what they left, or even better as to where we'd expect them to be at this time of the year. So, the use of the ebooks, the reading eggs, the use of Bedrock at home had a big impact on that, which has allowed us, with the 50% who were away from school, for us to then really focus in on what we would call the skills of the Vipers. I think with our, coming back to Bedrock, I've mentioned it before. We had a meeting with our CEO last week, who obviously was asking us about what we'd done as part of our, we call it recovery, because I don't like the word catch up. So we talk about the recovery, and what we've noticed is 18 months we've had Bedrock. It's been stop and start because of COVID, but really we've started to see this from September for 50% of the children, and now since March when we've all been back, we've really got a flow going, as I mentioned earlier on, and we're starting to see it now from the children. We had a couple of Year 6 children who were just within their topic. The word arid came up with one boy. Now, again, the word arid isn't something that I use every day in my general vocab, and it's certainly not something that he would. Now, he, again, is a typical boy. He's not a high flyer. He just, he mulches along in the sort of the middle to low group. But the word popped up in something they were reading as a class linked to the topic, and immediately he was like, oh, that's my Bedrock word, and this is what it means. And because he understood that word, that whole paragraph basically made sense to him. In the same lesson, the word barren came up, and again, a girl who again is one of our sort of, middle to low ability children. Again, she immediately was like, oh, that's my Bedrock word, and this is what it means. And again, the whole context of what they were reading suddenly made sense. So for us, just those two little things reassured us. Basically, we sort of, celebrated, because all of the hard work and our focus on vocab reading, it actually showed how important it is. Because if they didn't understand those words, they'd either have just sat there and gone, I don't really understand this, but it's gone over and I shall struggle. But the fact that they'd obviously, via Bedrock and everything we'd put into place, they'd been exposed to it. And for them, it was brilliant, because, they find learning difficult, but for them, all of a sudden, it was like, hang on, I've got this. So it really, really good.
And boost their confidence that actually that's a familiar word that I've encountered a number of times. That's really fantastic. Ellie, do you have any really positive stories like that?
Yeah, I do. So something that I did back in October, when I was looking at the sort of gaps that had appeared, I tracked the NGRT test and the reading age of our students against their Bedrock completion, which was actually really, really interesting and really insightful, because it basically revealed to me that actually there is a direct correlation between consistent and sort of completion of Bedrock and the exceeding completion of Bedrock lessons, and the amount of how much students improve in their reading age. So we had so in this, I sort of analysed, I looked at how much Bedrock students had done over the whole year, whether they had done their 126 lessons or whether they'd exceeded that. And then I looked at how much their reading age had improved over the whole year, including the lockdown period. And so, for example, Year 9 boys who had completed over 75% of their Bedrock lessons had, on average, improved 25 months in their reading age, despite being in lockdown, which was really positive. And there are lots of other things that happen with their literacy in lesson, but it is really showing that actually what we're doing whole school in terms of implementing the Bedrock and all the stuff we do in lessons and the reading for pleasure is actually having a really, really positive impact on our students. And that's sort of more like hardcore data, but the sort of more like soft stuff that our students really recognise that their vocabulary is improving. And we do a lot of metacognitive reflection, especially in English, and the students can articulate, I'm proud of this, I'm better at this now. And like when we've been flicking through books and book looks recently, it has been really nice to see that students are gaining that confidence in their own writing and what they're actually putting down on paper. And that comes through all the praise stuff that we've done, and students being really proud of getting on number 1 on the Bedrock leaderboard and being a reading champion, and all those things really is helping our students both confidence for their sort of the soft data, and actually in black and white it is having an impact.
And actually, given the your large percentage of pupil premium, and given the average number of months that a pupil premium student compared to their peers might finish school in terms of attainment, that's really going to bolster them going forward. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And Tara, have you seen any impact? Yeah, I know you've actually used Bedrock for the shortest amount of time, but in terms of sort of
a few things that stand out. I think the impact of our reading ages that have gone up, like the data I said before, is definitely the students that have been doing all of their Bedrock. They're the ones that have gone up the most. We've had a couple of students gone up like 3 years, and they are of their reading age, and they're the ones who consistently exceeded the Bedrock lessons that we've been setting them to do. But in terms of Bedrock, with an impact with our the students that are doing this, when we first started, so obviously we had the 2 lockdowns in between, motivating these secondary school students to do extra Bedrock, do their Bedrock lessons on top of their normal curriculum lessons. They were said every day is a challenge in itself. But when we came back, we have the students in attention who are not completing it, like I said earlier. And in year 7, we had 37 students. And then after a few weeks of being back into school, we got that down. It's only 11 students not completing their Bedrock now in year 7. Year 8, we had 48 students not completing it and in detention. And last week we only had 9. And then our year 9 group, which is our full cohort, we had 77 students not completing their Bedrock. And last week we only had 2 students not completing their Bedrock. And I think because it's having an impact on the parents as well. So I contact parents regularly, really encouraging to use their parental login. Everything's there for them. They get a text message, automatic text message home if their student has not completed Bedrock. So it's starting to roll out and really have an impact at home as well. So I think the impact on the parents for that, because we're sticking to our guns and we're following it through, and we're really showing them how they can grow in their vocabulary and what they can do with it. So yeah, the impact for me is harder to judge, but definitely I'm really looking forward to the rest of this year and the whole of next year, and really seeing our students grow with this, because it's been tough them being off of lockdown.
And actually that consistent approach is really crucial. And I was talking to Craig just before the webinar about bringing parents on board and things like that. But and actually I was talking to Swindon Academy as well, and they're very much like, this needs to be done. And at the beginning it is a battle, but then actually I think with your tweeting and lots of celebrations and the leaderboards, it really helps.
Yeah, it definitely does feel like a losing battle sometimes, but if you just keep at it, fun things to do like TikToks, fun videos to send them, and competitions, and it just really helps just to keep it at the forefront of everyone's mind as well.
Yeah, I did say we were going to finish, but we've got quite a few questions. So are we all okay to answer a few questions?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll try and pick out some of the key bits. So here, Hailsham, Tara, you've been answering questions, so thanks for that. So this is something we were going to come into, but Lee Morris has very helpfully asked it, is how do you go about getting staff invested in school-wide literacy? I found that my influence is limited and the large staff body do not take reading literacy seriously. And I think, obviously, if you've got a range of subjects, it's not your priority, even though it's everyone's responsibility. So we have had Ellie, you responded to that one, but does anyone else want to add to that? We did touch on the quick wins with Craig. But any sort of tricks or tips for tips for CPD?
Do you know, one of the things I think as well is to have a presence in staff briefings and give the staff the data and tell them what you're doing and get everyone involved. And I think if you're motivated and you're enthusiastic about it, then they'll feed off it, and then they'll know and make a big point of it. It's everyone. It's not just the English department's issue to get these students reading and writing. If they can't access it, they can't access your subject either. But to really just keep plugging away and just keep being there and keep being enthusiastic about it, and it will rub off, and it will, and show people why we're doing things and what is the impact, and lots of celebrations of impact brings others on board as well.
I used to also find just having easy strategies up your sleeve that they can use. So actually, we got a worksheet with Bedrock, which is like, actually, it goes through the steps. So if you're stuck, just put that with the word that you're teaching that day. And that's all you need to do. It's not any extra on your planning or marking, or just making sure that there are those words about on the wall. I know, Craig, you mentioned displays, but and those interactions you have in the corridor. Do you want to add anything, Craig, about your interactions in the corridor, because they sound like they have a big impact on your students and teachers?
So I mean, primary is slightly different in terms of, as a primary teacher, you have to be a master of all of the subjects. We don't have that battle between departments, but I think it is important that the other departments in a secondary and across understand that if they're struggling with the literacy aspect, then they're not going to be able to access theirs. In terms of the interaction with the children, at primary, children love to show off about new things. So we basically, rather than them showing off about a new fortnight dance or something like that they know about, we sort of encourage them to show off about new words. So I'll basically say to children, you know, if you can come up to me and you can use a bedrock word in a sentence or in a discussion, I'll give you some carrot points. So, you know, we'll often moving and I'll have children coming up to me going, oh, we haven't had a lot of rain, Mr. Early, it's quite arid out there today, isn't it?
Very good, very good.
I mean, sometimes they're coming out with words and I'm like, have you made that word up? I don't know. I mean, as an SLT, we love the tweet from Bedrock. I think it was a foo for all, which was the word which meant a fuss over nothing. I use that all the time now in my staff briefings, so even I got hooked.
Very good. Word of the day. Yeah, word of the week. But yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, no, it is always good, and actually students do love learning new words. I think Michael Morpurgo was saying, you know, just playing with words is it's a great thing. And when students have that confidence, like I've learned this new word, and they're breaking down into morphemes, it's a great thing for them to share with us. We're going to have to finish there, but I have to say thank you so much. And yeah, thank you very much, guys, for joining. Are you all going to take off your mics and say goodbye?
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.